Hey, how you doing, Ryan? So a few things I want to talk about to start things off. First one's going to be the unrack. Unrack looked just good, or looked just fine. Looked a lot better than it has in previous weeks. But the biggest thing that I want to talk about with the unrack is actually the walkout. So you'll notice unrack looks pretty good, standing nice and up right there. I want it to be at this speed. Right foot back, hold a second. Left foot back and to the left, hold a second. Right foot slightly further out where it needs to go, hold a second, and you're done. You're absolutely done. Let's focus on it being 3 steps every single time. And for some reason, lifters have this thought or this natural tendency that says that, oh shit, I have 400, 500, 600 pounds, whatever it may be, on my back. Let's try to get into position as fast as possible. So we'll take these little baby steps, sporadic baby steps everywhere, and that's not necessarily your case right here. We can clean it up a little bit, but it's not this bad. But they take sporadic baby steps here, 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 keep adjusting, keep adjusting, keep adjusting, and meanwhile they're just getting more and more slouched over, they're wasting more and more energy, and they're just not attaining a good position. So what I want to do is I want to put some extra focus into 3-step walkout, slow things down, make every step count, and be very diligent with the walkout. Now, with the actual squat pattern, the biggest thing that I'm noticing is that we are hinging to a degree that you would need to if you were in your before position, if you had the barbell lower down like we had it before, but we moved it higher, so now we have to hinge less. Okay, so you used to have to hinge this much. We're hinging right now, same thing, this much. But we need to hinge now this much. And the reason why this is so important is because the whole reason we hinge is partly because of our hip structure, but another part is because we're trying to get that weight right in our midfoot. Right in our midfoot is where it needs to be. If we look at the side angle camera view of somebody squatting, the cap of the barbell should be right over the midfoot. If it's not, they have a lot more in the tank and they're not being very efficient. Now, the reason why it's so important to talk about hinging is because we're hinging too much, which isn't necessarily a bad thing until you take into account, well, look at the cap. We're not necessarily directly to the side like I'd like to be, but look at this. Now, the camera angle may be making it look worse than it actually is, just because it's not directly to the side, but I guarantee you that this cap is still at, if not beyond, our toes, and not where it needs to be with our midfoot. So what we need to do is we need to adjust things to where the cap of that barbell is right in the midfoot. All the weight of the barbell is centered right in your midfoot and not on your toes. Because right now, with it being on your toes, we're causing a lot of energy leaks, not very optimal positions. And on top of that, we could be putting a little additional strain on our low back because of it. So these are things that we got to focus on if we're going to stick with that higher barbell position, which again, I'm not really biased towards either way. We can go back to low bar, do some more shoulder external flexion work, and call it good, or we can keep this high bar position. It's up to you. But if we keep this higher bar position, it's still low bar. It's a higher version of a low bar squat. But if we keep this new barbell position, we have to get used to hinging less, because right now we're overdoing it, and when we overdo it, we're going to have that weight be way over our toes. So that's kind of the biggest thing that affected your squat this week. Yeah, in the second rep here, we look just a little sporadic too. You'll notice we go from here, and we're just going really fast on the eccentric. Because you have a new hinging pattern, because you have a new barbell position, it makes a really big difference. We need to slow things down on the eccentric. We're going to almost want to treat each and every eccentric like somewhat of a tempo, having it be at least 2.5, 3 count eccentric to get in the hole, really focusing on having the perfect hinging mechanics. So the second we go too fast, your body's immediately going to revert back to what it's used to doing. If it goes back to what it's used to doing, that way it's going to be way over your toes. It's going to feel like shit. So we just got to get used to going a little slower for the time being, get used to the new hinging mechanics, and it's going to feel 10 times easier. Sumo deadlift off the 1-inch block actually looks really good. T-spine extension looked a lot better. Mechanics on this, I love. Really like these mechanics. One note I have on this is don't be afraid to wear a belt for overhead pressing. The reason why is because overhead pressing, you're going to extension. Lumbar extension has to happen with a few exercises and a few exercises only. One of them is the bench press. Bench press, you go into extension, but you don't always need a belt. The reason why you don't need a belt and you're in extension is because it's not a compressive motion. It's not a compressive loading vector. So, for example, if I'm bench pressing, it's a anterior-posterior loading vector where we're going here to here, almost like a reverse row. But now with the overhead press, we're having to go into lumbar extension, break this stacked position that we absolutely need for optimal power transfer, and under compressive loading conditions. We're compressing ourselves by pressing above us. So that is one of the hardest things for your back to go through. Now, luckily, with overhead press, you're not handling very much weight. If you go into lumbar extension with a 500-pound squat, that's going to be a lot shittier than going to slight extension your lumbar spine with a 150-pound overhead press. With that being said, though, with all that considered, I want you to start wearing a belt. It's going to really help just transfer far more power, maybe even get a little bit more hip drive, and put that low back in a less risk position by wearing a belt, pressing into it, and overhead pressing with it. Everything else about your overhead press looks good. I would just definitely suggest wearing a belt, even if it's loose, just to have something to press up against while you're in that extended lumbar position, which is just going to help from an injury prevention standpoint, on top of just a stabilization, top of power transfer, so on and so forth, all the things that a belt does for any other exercise.